Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
I'm so honored to have a special guest with me today. She is a certified nonprofit expert, a seminar facilitator, author, and if I say so myself, a very sweet spirit. Please help me welcome Miss Aretha Olivarez. Hi, Aretha. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to talk to you about something that multiple things as pertains to business and nonprofit organizations. First, I wanted to start with your business. You run a consulting firm called Multiplying Talent. I saw that name and it just spoke volumes to me. And I'm just curious, what sparked that name? Where did that name come from?
That name actually comes from the parable of the talent, and I have to say it's actually a for-profit business. It's a for-profit business that helps nonprofits. And I started it as a nonprofit, though, but the rule of thumb is who benefits from it financially. And since I was the one benefited from it financially, then it had to be for-profit. So it was dissolved and turned into a for-profit. But the name actually comes from the parable of the talents. You know the story about one who was given 1 talent, 2 talents, and 3 talents. And the one who had the 1, he just hid his talent. He didn't share it. He didn't multiply. He didn't increase it. He didn't go to anybody else with like minds. He just kept it and said, I'm just going to wait until my master comes back and just give him what he gave me, instead of bringing increase to himself and to others. So that's where the name Multiplying Talent comes from.
I love that, and that is one of my favorite parables in the New Testament. And now I see the correlation, because I didn't even think of that at first, but I see it now, and that's an amazing insight. So you do a great work with, like you say, your business, helping nonprofit organizations. How did you get into that?
I started that business because I was in the Navy, and I ended up going to culinary school because I had my own wedding cake business. And while I was in chef school, I said, you know what, I think I want to start my own nonprofit culinary arts training program. There was no one to help me besides attorneys. I could not afford an attorney at the time. They wanted $3,000 to $5,000 just to do my paperwork. And so I found a book at the public library that walks you through step by step how to do your own nonprofit. I did it myself. I got it approved. I was so excited. Then I started the nonprofit business, and people were seeing me on the news. They were hearing about me, and of course I had to write my own grants. And so people started saying, well, how did you get your 501c3? Who did your 501c3? How did you get the grants? And I was like, I did it. I thought it was easy. So I started helping other people do it. And I started for free. I started offering seminars and workshops, just teaching people how to do it. The seminars is a way to teach more than one person, because I felt like I was spending a lot of time helping one person at a time. And so I said, let me start doing seminars. So it evolved into that. And my nonprofit business was excelling. Then I got recalled back to active duty for 9/11. So my nonprofit business, of course, died because my board of directors weren't, strong enough to carry the vision. And while I was on active duty, I wrote my own book about how to start your own nonprofit. So that's kind of the story, in a short nutshell.
Now, I understand you went to the United States Senate floor to speak, courtesy of Miss Oprah Winfrey. Tell me, what was that experience like, and how did it come about?
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, my nonprofit was a culinary arts job training program, and at that time there was a movement for community kitchens, and there was a gentleman in Washington, D.C. named Robert Egger who started that movement. His is called DC Central Kitchen, and I saw him on 2020, and I thought, oh my God, I got to get in touch with him because he's doing exactly what I'm doing here in Central Florida. I want to see how we can connect. I called him. We made a connection over the phone. He said, why don't you come to D.C. and I'll show you around and show you how, we're doing things here, because they were light years ahead of where we are. We were only 2 years old. But he was invited to Oprah Winfrey, and she said, what is your biggest problem? Of course, he said funding. we need funding. And there are other community kitchens. At that time, there were 13 other community kitchens, and mine included, that we need funding. So she paid for all of us to go to Washington, D.C., to speak on the Senate floor to talk about issues of homelessness and funding to feed children and families and, of course, the homeless at the time. It was an incredible experience. 7 days. Of course, during the week we were able to tour Washington, go to speak to our senators and congressmen, and that's how I found out a lot about grants, too, and how the funding trickles down. So not only was it an incredible experience to say, hey, Oprah paid for this trip, and after that, about 2 years later, her team followed up with us to find out how we were doing and how our graduates were doing, just so they can follow up on the story. So it was an incredible experience, something that I could say, that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Wow, that is amazing. Now, let's get down to a little detail in business. You run a for-profit and you help nonprofits, so you're perfect to speak from both sides of the coin. Tell us first, though, before we get into some of the details, what is the difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit business?
Well, it's not too much different. People think, the nonprofit can't do this, the nonprofit can't do that. Well, the nonprofit must make a profit in order to keep their doors open. So that's always a myth. People think, I have to use all the money at the end of the year. So the primary difference is once a for-profit reaches a certain mark, let's say they reach, $1 million, $2 billion, they can now go on the stock market to increase their income by providing stock and shares to the public. Well, a nonprofit cannot do that because they serve in interest to the public, meaning after they pay all their expenses, say if they have a building, they pay the rent or the lease or the mortgage, they pay salaries. What's left over, they have to use it in service to the public. So that's primarily the difference. For-profit can, grow as far as, Apple or Microsoft and trade shares and have stockholders, but the nonprofit serves in interest to the public. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Oh, it does. It does make sense. So when people are launching into business, how do they know which option they should go for?
That's a great question. If you are doing something charitable, educational, or religious, and let's include scientific, you should be doing it as a nonprofit. And the one thing I said in the beginning, who is going to benefit from it financially at the end of the day? Are you serving the general public, doing something charitable, educational, religious, or scientific? That should be nonprofit. If you have a lawn mowing business, of course that should be for profit.
So in light of that, is there different structures legally? Because I know with the for-profit you do LLC, C Corp. Is that pretty much the same on both sides?
No, it's not the same. And people always, not always, but some people ask me, well, if I'm a nonprofit, how should I set it up, as an S Corp or C Corp? No, you're neither one of those. S Corp, C Corp, and as you said, LLC, those structures are set up for a for-profit business. A nonprofit business is simply a nonprofit corporation. So it's two different forms or two different business structures. When you go to your Secretary of State to see which form you need to fill out, they'll have a for-profit side and they'll have a nonprofit side. So make sure you're looking at the nonprofit forms. Okay.
Now, let's talk about the legal structures just for those who may be going into for-profit. What is, because I know you have sole proprietorship, LLC, and S Corp. And I remember when I started my business, I was confused. I did sole proprietor because it was only me, and I just felt that was the one I was supposed to do. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, basically all those are they're business structures that you have for-profit entities, but it's basically the way the IRS is going to tax you. So a C Corp is usually for a larger corporation, and S Corp is usually for a small business like mine and maybe yourself. Of course, sole proprietorship is basically, if I was a beautician and, it was just me, I would set that up. Or if I had a booth in a salon, then I would be a sole proprietor. So that's basically the difference. It's basically how the IRS is going to tax you.
Okay. Well, for those who may be very new and have no experience launching out into their own business, in your experience, in your opinion, what would you say is like the very first thing they must do without having any business experience or anything? What is the first thing they must do in order to start their business?
They need to research first. So, after you've written your vision down and you know what you want to do, then do some research. We have Google, who I call Dr. Google because Google knows everything. Make sure you go online and find out, what's the proper structure, or if are there some seminars or workshops in your area that you can attend? Is there a consultant you can talk to get advice? But after you've written down your vision or your mission or your business plan, either one, but do some research. Make sure you've done your due diligence. So that's the first thing, research.
You got your vision, your research done, and then you go into, would you say the next step would be establishing the articles of incorporation, or would it be more so identifying your business structure?
Well, yes, identify your business structure, which direction you want to go. If you want to go for profit, then you could set it up as a single person. But if you're going to go nonprofit, then you have to have board of directors. So you need to find an odd number of people, preferably not majority family members, who have the qualifications and the desire to help you keep that nonprofit healthy financially.
And speak to the board of directors just for a moment, because I know a lot. I know a couple of people that are developing their own nonprofits right now, and they're having trouble. They know they need a certain caliber of people, but they're having trouble, I guess, finding those people, and because they're new to it. So how would you suggest a person go about trying to locate the right people for their board of directors?
That's a great question, and that's always the struggle for new nonprofits. You have to first network, get out there and get to know people who, say if you have a daycare, you want to get to know people who are in education. You want to get to know somebody who is maybe a police officer. You have to identify the individuals who you think would be a good fit, and then network and get to know people. Ask other people who they think would be a good fit, but then don't just allow them to be on your board. Make sure you interview them, tell them what your vision is, what your mission is, and ask them, do they think they can help, what they think they can bring to the table. That's very important.
Because I know a lot of people step into that realm and they don't really know. And then a lot of times it's difficult. Well, you got to really know what you're getting into and that's why the research is important, because a lot of times when you go to these people, they want to know exactly what you're doing and what you want them to do, and a lot of times I found that people aren't completely clear on that. And that's what kind of discourages those people who probably have the experience to help them. It discourages them from wanting to be a part because the people are not clear about their vision, And I think that's why you made that research such a major issue at the beginning of starting, because you have to know, even if you're for-profit or nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cornell, may I make another point? A lot of times people, if you start a for-profit business, you're doing it because it's something you love to do. And if it's just you can do it whenever you feel like doing it. If today I don't feel like running my consulting business, I can shut my phone off. But when you have a nonprofit, a lot of times people start nonprofits because they see a problem or they see an issue. Let's take the homeless, for example. They see somebody on the street and they want to feed them. And next thing you know, they're feeding them a lot. Next thing you know, they have them in their home, and their home becomes a transition home. And then they realize, this is much more than I bargained for. I just wanted to help because I saw a problem. But a lot of nonprofits don't realize, yes, you have to have board members, you have to know the laws, you have to know what you can and can't do. And there's so many things, and it becomes overwhelming to people when you don't have the right board to help you, hold your arms up. It becomes overwhelming because they said, I didn't get into this for this. I got in because I wanted to help and make a difference. But they didn't realize they were running a business, and you have to treat it like a business.
That's right. Well, let's speak, because in addition to you helping nonprofits, well, a part of that is the grant writing, as you spoke about just a little earlier. You wrote your own grants. Tell us, grant funding. I know a lot of people know that grants are, go for school, people that get it for their kids going to school. but they don't realize that they can get grants for their business. And I know that you can get grants for nonprofits, but is it possible to get a grant for a for-profit business as well?
Yeah, there are some grants for profit. They are far and few between, but they do exist. I would tell people to always start on the state and local level. For example, I served on a grant review board for MEBA. It was called Minority Entrepreneur Business Assistance Program, and the city of Orlando was giving away $10,000, some up to $20,000 for-profit businesses. But there was a catch to that. The catch was you had to have your business in a certain area of Orlando, and at the time they were trying to revitalize the downtown area, so they want your business to be downtown. And you also have to read those grants to see the exact criteria, because the criteria for that grant was instead of giving you $10,000, they would pay your rent for 2 years, and that would be your grant. So when people think of a grant, they're thinking of money, but sometimes it could come in the form of a gift of a building or rent or a car or a home or things like that. But yeah, there are some for-profit grants out there.
Okay, that's good to know. How should someone go about searching them? Just a Google search?
You can use Dr. Google, but also, like I said, contact. If you want a grant, it depends on what you want a grant for. So whoever you want a grant for, sometimes you can just contact that organization. But like I said, I start on the city level. You start locally and see Active City if they know of any grants for your type of business. And if they say no, do you know of any other organizations that may be able to provide me this information?
And the grant writing process, is that something you think a person can do on their own if they really focus, or should they seek out help?
You should seek out help for the first time. Once you've written your grant, then maybe you can pull from that grant and use it for another one, but you definitely should seek out help. If it's not a professional, then you go to a grant writing course, so that first of all, you do need to go to a grant writing course, because the grant writer is going to pull from you. They cannot write without you. So you definitely need to have your grant semi-written, and then let the grant writer, kind of flow from that.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I want to ask as it pertains to the grant writing, and I'm just curious because I've seen, particularly on the nonprofit side, organizations get funding and they have personnel and everything's going well, and then all of a sudden the funding stops and they have to lay off and terminate. How does the nonprofit establish itself so the grants or the money itself doesn't run out? Is there a strategy they can use to go about that?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that, because as I travel and do my grant writing workshops, I always tell my nonprofits, yes, you need grants, but your nonprofit needs more than one stream of income. The grants are one stream of income, and the grants will run out. And now funders want to know, okay, when our money runs out, how will you sustain yourself? So your nonprofit needs to have a separate stream of income. Let's go back to the homeless situation. If you, I have a nonprofit here called One Heart for Women and Children. It's not mine. I serve on the board. They feed the homeless. They take care of families by providing them food, but they also have a thrift shop. So that's a stream of income. They make at least $1,500 a day just by selling items that were donated to them in their thrift store. So your nonprofit needs to have more than one stream of income. And somebody may be listening saying, well, what other kind of stream of income can I have? Use your gifts and talents. That's why, again, my business is called Multiplying Talents. Let's use you, for example. If you had a nonprofit, Cornell, and then you have a great speaking ability, you can have workshops using your gifts and talents. That can create income for you and create income for your nonprofit.
Now, in that vein, okay, you're saying have a stream of income. Does the nonprofit own? Is it that the nonprofit owns a for-profit business, or is it I, Cornell, own a nonprofit and then I have a for-profit on the other side? How is that structured?
Now, as an individual, and let's use you for example, you should definitely have a for-profit business, because some things you want to keep separate. For example, if you write a book and Oprah says, oh, my God, this is the best book in the world, and it sells, 100,000 copies and makes $1 million, your board decides how that money gets used. So you definitely want to keep that for profit. Now, as far as the nonprofit side, if the nonprofit generates income, anything that's generated and it flows through the nonprofit, it belongs to the nonprofit. So if it flows through the nonprofit, it belongs to the nonprofit.
Okay, that's important because I know I was thinking that the nonprofit owned the for-profit, but it doesn't. You have to realize that the nonprofit is going to actually control how that money is used. So that's an important indication. I'm glad I asked that. Okay, well, this has been very informative. I want to just ask, are there any books, resources, documentary, anything that you think that we should be taking in as we prepare to move into business, whether it be for-profit, nonprofit, anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, of course. For nonprofits, of course, I'm going to recommend my books, The Best Guide for Nonprofit Corporations and the Grant Writing Tools, and you can find those on Multiplying Talent, that's plural.com, multiplyingtalent.plural. There are tons of for-profit business books that are available. If you go to Amazon and put in certain ones, there's so many running through my mind right now, so I don't want to name one in particular, but just do some research. If you don't get them on Amazon, go to your public library. We forget about using the library these days, and of course there are tons of e-books, but there are tons of business books that you can use.
Okay. And you offer classes of some kind. Can you let our audience know how they can find out about that?
Yeah, I just finished a 5-city tour just Sunday. I'm still exhausted, but I do travel around and do workshops, so I may come to your area. You could find that information out on my website, Multiplying Talent, or mainly I do them in the Orlando area, but I do go to Texas, Virginia, Atlanta, and the Midwest area, Chicago, quite often.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad you joined me today, Aretha, and it has been a pleasure. And you are a great resource, and we thank you for the work that you do in both the profit and nonprofit sectors. Well, this has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.